Welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of Sleepless History. Today, we embark on a journey through the rugged, untamed landscapes of the Wild West, a time of cowboys, outlaws, and frontier towns that seemed to spring up overnight. But as we delve into this romanticized era, let's confront a hard truth. Most of us wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West. The Wild West, spanning from the 1860s to the early 1900s, was a period marked by harsh realities and unforgiving landscapes. The allure of the open plains and the promise of gold drew many hopeful souls, yet the reality was often a stark contrast to the dream. First, let's consider the environment. The Wild West was characterized by vast deserts, rugged mountains, and dense forests. The elements were often hostile. Imagine standing under the scorching sun of the desert, with temperatures soaring past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Water was a precious commodity, often miles away. Your body would quickly dehydrate, leaving you weak and vulnerable. And then there were the winters. Those who lived in the northern territories faced brutal cold, where temperatures could plummet to life-threatening lows. The snow could bury entire towns, cutting off supplies and isolating families for weeks on end. The clothing we wear today, designed for comfort and warmth, would do little to protect us from the biting winds and freezing temperatures. Now, let's talk about the wildlife. The Wild West was home to a plethora of creatures, some of which were not friendly. Imagine stumbling upon a rattlesnake, its warning rattle echoing in your ears. The fear of venomous bites loomed large. Bears, mountain lions, and even wolves roamed the territories, posing constant threats. While many people today have a healthy respect for nature, we often lack the skills to defend ourselves in a truly wild environment. The instinct to survive may kick in, but without proper training, many of us would find ourselves outmatched by the very landscape that beckoned us. Next, there's the matter of food. In a world without grocery stores or convenient access to modern foods, survival depended on hunting and gathering. The knowledge of edible plants and hunting techniques was critical. Many people in the Wild West were skilled in these areas, having learned from generations before them. But what about us? How many of us could identify a safe berry from a poisonous one? How many could set a trap to catch a rabbit or skin it for food? The skills that were once commonplace have faded in modern society, leaving us ill-equipped for the challenges of survival. Moreover, let's not forget the lawlessness that permeated the Wild West. This was a time when the rule of law was often absent, and justice was a concept that varied greatly from one town to another. Bandits roamed freely, and shootouts in the streets were not uncommon. In the absence of law enforcement, communities often took matters into their own hands. Vigilante justice was a harsh reality, and disputes could lead to deadly confrontations. The bravado and gunslinging skills required to navigate such a world are not traits found in most of us today. Consider the infamous gunfights of the era. Names like Wild Bill Hickok and Billy the Kid strike a chord in our minds, but the truth is, these men were exceptions, not the rule. They were born into a life of violence, trained from a young age to use firearms proficiently. For the average person thrust into this chaos, it would be a nightmare. Additionally, the social dynamics of the Wild West were fraught with tension. Racial and ethnic divides were prevalent, and discrimination was rampant. Native American tribes were often forcibly removed from their lands, leading to violent conflicts. If you were not a white settler, your chances of survival were drastically reduced. Women faced their own challenges in this time. While some found independence and became successful business owners or homesteaders, many others lived under oppressive conditions. The societal expectations placed on women were rigid, and the dangers they faced, whether from men or the environment, were daunting. Now let's turn our attention to the health aspect. In the Wild West, access to medical care was limited at best. Doctors were few and far between, and those that did exist often lacked the knowledge and tools we take for granted today. Simple ailments could quickly escalate into life-threatening conditions. Imagine enduring a fever or an infection without the comfort of modern medicine. The absence of antibiotics and advanced medical knowledge would be a terrifying prospect for most of us. The reality of illness could mean death for many settlers, a grim fate lurking just around the corner. Furthermore, Let's consider the mental toll of living in such a harsh environment. The isolation of frontier life weighed heavily on many settlers. The vast distances between towns and the challenges of communication meant that loneliness could set in quickly. For those unaccustomed to solitude, the psychological strain could be overwhelming. The anxiety of survival, coupled with the emotional weight of isolation, could lead to despair. Many settlers turned to alcohol as a means of coping, leading to further issues within communities. In our modern world, we often have support systems in place: friends, family, and mental health resources. But in the Wild West, such support was scarce. The rugged individualism that defined the era often left people to fend for themselves, mentally and emotionally. As we reflect on these challenges, it's clear that the romanticized vision of the Wild West does not account for the harsh realities faced by those who lived during that time. The tales of adventure and heroism are captivating, but they gloss over the struggles that would challenge even the most resilient individuals. In essence, the Wild West was not just a backdrop for daring escapades. It was a battleground of survival, where the line between life and death was razor thin. So, as we ponder our own abilities to thrive in such an environment, it's a sobering reminder of the comforts we often take for granted. In closing, dear listeners, the Wild West is a fascinating chapter in our history, filled with tales of bravery, adventure, and hardship. Yet for the vast majority of us, it remains a world best left to the pages of history books and the silver screen. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why most of us would not survive in the Wild West. Until next time, take care of yourselves and cherish the comforts of the present. As we delve deeper into the myriad reasons why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us, let's turn our focus to the concept of community. In the Wild West, community was both a lifeline and a potential source of conflict. Settlements and towns often sprang up around shared resources, but these communities were fragile. The relationships between neighbors were crucial for survival. Bartering for goods, sharing knowledge about the land, and working together during times of crisis were essential. However, trust was hard-earned and easily lost. Imagine living in a place where your neighbors might be as much of a threat as they were a source of support. Disputes over land or resources could ignite quickly, leading to feuds that lasted for generations. The tight-knit nature of these communities also meant that everyone was aware of each other's business. Rumors could spread like wildfire, often leading to paranoia and distrust. In modern society, we have the luxury of anonymity and the ability to seek help from various support systems and networks. In the Wild West, if you were an outsider or didn't fit in, your chances of survival diminished significantly. The social dynamics were complex, and without the ability to integrate into a community, isolation would be an imminent danger. Now let's reflect on the transportation challenges of the time. The Wild West was vast, and the infrastructure we rely on today was virtually non-existent. Traveling from one settlement to another could take days or even weeks, depending on the terrain and the weather. The roads were often little more than trails, winding through treacherous landscapes. The horse was the primary mode of transportation, but horses were not infallible. They could tire, become sick, or even die. Imagine finding yourself lost in the wilderness, with no means to navigate and no idea how far you were from safety. And what about the dangers of travel? Bandits often targeted lone travelers, and the threat of ambush was ever present. The tales of stagecoach robberies and train heists are well known, but they represent just a fraction of the dangers faced by those moving through the territory. In a world where map reading skills were essential, how many of us would falter in unfamiliar territory? The reliance on landmarks and an understanding of the land's geography was crucial. Without these skills, navigating through the vast expanses of the Wild West would feel like stepping into a labyrinth. Let's not overlook the economic challenges either. The economy of the Wild West was fragile and often unpredictable. Many settlers arrived with dreams of prosperity, only to find that their hopes were dashed by drought, failed crops, or market crashes. Imagine pouring your life savings into a homestead, only to realize that the land was barren and unyielding. The harsh reality of farming in the West was that it required not just hard work, but also a deep understanding of the land's conditions. Most of us lack the agricultural knowledge that would be necessary to cultivate crops successfully in such a challenging environment. Furthermore, the lure of gold drove countless individuals westward, but the reality of mining was far from glamorous. The mines were dangerous places, fraught with the risk of cave-ins and toxic gases. The work was grueling, and the competition was fierce. For every person who struck it rich, countless others faced failure and despair. Let's also consider the impact of disease. The Wild West was not immune to epidemics, and the lack of sanitation and medical care made even minor illnesses potentially deadly. Typhoid fever, cholera, and smallpox were rampant, and the understanding of disease transmission was rudimentary at best. Imagine being struck down by an illness without access to proper care. The fear of contagion and the reality of losing loved ones to preventable diseases would hang heavy in the air. Today, we have vaccines and medical advancements that protect us from many of these threats. But in the Wild West, a simple illness could become a death sentence. Mental health is another aspect often overlooked in discussions about survival in the Wild West. The pressures of frontier life, combined with isolation, could lead to a host of psychological issues. The lack of understanding and stigma surrounding mental health meant that individuals suffering from conditions like depression or anxiety had little support. The rugged individualism that defined the era often left people to confront their struggles alone. The absence of community resources and mental health professionals would make it incredibly difficult for someone to seek help. In a world that demanded physical strength and resilience, the emotional toll could go unnoticed and unaddressed. As we continue to explore the complexities of life in the Wild West, let's also examine the role of technology. While the era saw some advancements, the technology we take for granted today simply did not exist. Communication was slow, often relying on horseback riders or telegraph lines that were limited in their reach. Imagine trying to send a message to a loved one or coordinate an effort to help someone in distress. The delays could mean the difference between life and death. Today, we can connect with anyone around the world in an instant, but in the Wild West, isolation was a constant threat. The lack of modern conveniences extended to everyday life as well. Basic amenities that we consider essential, running water, electricity, and indoor plumbing, were often non-existent. Daily tasks took hours to complete, and the physical labor involved in maintaining a homestead was demanding. For those unaccustomed to hard work, the physical toll of such a lifestyle would be overwhelming. The idea of rising with the sun and working until darkness fell is one that most modern individuals would struggle to adapt to. The sheer exhaustion from manual labor would be a daily reality, and many would find it hard to keep up. Furthermore, let's consider the psychological aspect of living in a world devoid of modern entertainment and distractions. After a long day of work, there were few options for leisure. Storytelling, music, and dance were vital, but the lack of variety and options could lead to boredom and frustration. In contrast, we live in a world filled with endless entertainment. The ability to escape into movies, books, and digital worlds allows us to unwind and recharge. In the Wild West, the lack of options could weigh heavily on the spirit, leading to feelings of discontent and isolation. Lastly, let's touch on the cultural norms that defined the Wild West. The social mores of the time were vastly different from our own. Gender roles were rigid, and the expectations placed on individuals were often stifling. Women were expected to adhere to strict societal norms, while men were often pressured to display toughness and resilience. For someone not accustomed to these expectations, navigating social interactions could be incredibly challenging. The pressure to conform could lead to feelings of inadequacy and anxiety. The very fabric of society was woven with expectations that could be suffocating for those who didn't fit the mold. In conclusion, as we reflect on the myriad reasons why survival in the Wild West would be an insurmountable challenge for most of us, it becomes evident that this era was defined by hardship and resilience. The romanticized tales of adventure often overshadow the stark realities faced by those who lived during this time. The environment, community dynamics, transportation challenges, economic hardships, health risks, and social expectations all contributed to a way of life that was fraught with danger and uncertainty. It is a sobering reminder of the comforts we often take for granted in our modern world. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why most of us would not survive in the Wild West. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the conveniences of today. As we continue to explore the harsh realities of life in the Wild West, it's important to delve into the intricacies of daily survival skills that were essential during this period. The ability to adapt and thrive in such an unforgiving environment was not just a luxury, it was a necessity. One of the most critical skills for survival in the Wild West was the knowledge of animal husbandry. Settlers often relied on livestock for food, clothing, and labor. Raising cattle, sheep, or goats was a significant undertaking that required extensive knowledge of animal care. The harsh conditions meant that livestock could easily fall ill or become malnourished. Imagine having to nurse a sick animal back to health without modern veterinary medicine. The knowledge of animal anatomy and the ability to identify ailments were crucial. For those of us raised in urban environments, the idea of tending to livestock is far removed from our daily realities. The intimate bond that many farmers had with their animals was built on a foundation of understanding and experience that few possess today. Moreover, the ability to hunt was a vital skill for survival. While some settlers engaged in farming, hunting provided a necessary supplement to their diets. The skills required to track, trap, and kill game were not simply learned overnight. They were honed through years of practice and often passed down through generations. Picture yourself in the wild, armed with nothing but a rifle or a bow and arrow. The pressure to provide food for yourself and your family would be immense. The ability to remain silent and patient, to read the signs of the land, and to accurately aim your weapon were skills that many settlers mastered. For the average person today, these skills might be entirely elusive, leaving us at the mercy of our surroundings. Equally important was the knowledge of foraging. The Wild West was home to a variety of edible plants, berries, and nuts, but distinguishing the safe from the poisonous was paramount. Imagine wandering through a forest, trying to identify which berries you could eat and which would lead to illness. This skill was not just a matter of preference, but of survival. Misidentification could have fatal consequences. Foraging required an understanding of the seasons as well. Many plants were only available at specific times of the year. The inability to gather and preserve food would mean going hungry during the winter months. Today, we often rely on supermarkets for our food supply, but in the Wild West, gaining knowledge about the land was essential for survival. Let's also examine the importance of shelter. While many settlers built homes, these structures were often rudimentary at best. Without the skills to construct a durable shelter, surviving the elements would be nearly impossible. The ability to build a strong, insulated home was crucial for protection against harsh winters and scorching summers. Imagine trying to construct a shelter with limited tools and materials, relying solely on your ingenuity. For many, the process of building a home was labor-intensive and fraught with challenges. The modern conveniences of prefabricated homes and construction technology are a far cry from the skills required to build a sturdy dwelling from scratch. Additionally, the ability to navigate the challenges of fire management was essential. Fire was a dual-edged sword in the Wild West. It provided warmth and light, but also posed a significant threat. Without modern firefighting methods, the risk of wildfires was ever present, and settlers had to be vigilant in managing their fires safely. Imagine living in a world where a single spark could lead to a devastating blaze, destroying crops, homes, and lives. Understanding how to build a fire, maintain it, and extinguish it safely were crucial skills. Today, we often take for granted the ability to simply flick a switch or turn a knob to create light and warmth. Now let's shift our attention to the financial realities of settling in the Wild West. The economy was often unstable, and many settlers arrived with little more than hope and determination. The lack of banks and financial institutions made acquiring loans nearly impossible. Most relied on their own resources or the goodwill of their neighbors. Imagine starting from scratch, with no safety net to fall back on. The pressure to succeed financially weighed heavily on settlers. Failure could mean losing everything: your home, your livelihood, and your family's security. The risk of financial ruin was ever present, and for many, it was a harsh reality that left them struggling to make ends meet. The challenges of trade were also significant. While bartering was common, it required a deep understanding of value and negotiation skills. The ability to assess goods, determine worth, and strike a fair deal were essential. In a world where supplies were often scarce, understanding the market dynamics could mean the difference between survival and starvation. Moreover, the transportation of goods was fraught with difficulty. The lack of reliable roads and transportation systems meant that moving supplies from one place to another was a monumental task. The logistics of acquiring necessary materials often required meticulous planning and time. Today, we can order almost anything online and have it delivered to our doorstep within days. In the Wild West, the journey for goods could take weeks or even months. The sheer patience and perseverance required to navigate these challenges would be daunting for most people today, who are accustomed to instant gratification. In addition to the physical challenges, let's examine the cultural and social expectations that defined life in the Wild West. The era was characterized by strong gender roles, with men often expected to be the breadwinners and protectors, while women were relegated to the domestic sphere. For those who didn't fit the mold, whether due to gender, race, or background, survival could be even more difficult. Women, despite facing societal constraints, often found ways to contribute to their family's survival, whether through farming, sewing, or running businesses. However, the expectations placed on them were rigid, and straying from societal norms could lead to ostracization. Imagine navigating a world where your worth was determined solely by your adherence to societal expectations. The pressure to conform could be immense, and those who did not fit in might find themselves isolated and struggling. The sense of community that was essential for survival could quickly turn into exclusion for those deemed different. Religion also played a significant role in the lives of many settlers. Faith provided comfort in difficult times, but it could also foster a sense of judgment and exclusion. For those who did not share the prevailing beliefs, the social landscape could be unforgiving. The intertwining of faith and daily life meant that straying from the accepted norms could lead to significant social repercussions. As we reflect on these complexities, it becomes evident that the Wild West was not just a backdrop for adventure and exploration. It was a harsh, unyielding reality that tested the limits of human endurance. The skills and knowledge required for survival were vast, and the challenges faced by settlers were immense. In closing, the romanticized vision of the Wild West often overlooks the struggles that defined life during this era. The environment, social dynamics, economic hardships, and cultural expectations all contributed to a way of life that was fraught with danger and uncertainty. For those of us living in the comforts of modern society, it serves as a sobering reminder of the resilience and ingenuity of those who came before us. The Wild West may be a fascinating chapter in history, but for most of us, it remains a world best left to the pages of books and the frames of old films. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be an insurmountable challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the many conveniences and supports that the modern world affords us. As we further unravel the complexities of life in the Wild West, it's essential to consider the impact of the social structure and legal system, or lack thereof. The Wild West was a unique blend of opportunity and chaos, where the rules were often unwritten and the consequences of actions could be dire. This lawlessness posed a significant threat to survival. In many towns, law enforcement was minimal or non-existent. The local sheriff or marshal often lacked the resources or manpower to maintain order. In some cases, towns relied on the goodwill of vigilante groups, which could lead to brutal forms of justice that were often more about retribution than fairness. Imagine a world where disputes could escalate into violence without the oversight of a fair judicial system. Many settlers took the law into their own hands, leading to a culture of vigilantism that could erupt at any moment. The fear of retribution for perceived slights or wrongdoings created an atmosphere of tension and paranoia. The stakes were high, and any misstep could lead to a deadly confrontation. For those unaccustomed to such volatility, navigating this landscape would be nearly impossible. The ability to diffuse potentially violent situations and to understand the nuances of frontier justice required a level of emotional intelligence and street smarts that many of us simply do not possess today. Additionally, the concept of property rights was often tenuous. Disputes over land and resources could lead to violent confrontations. The idea of squatters' rights, where individuals claimed land without legal ownership, added to the complexity. Imagine spending years building a homestead only to have someone else claim it as their own. The potential for conflict was ever present, and the absence of a reliable legal recourse made survival precarious. Moreover, the economic landscape of the Wild West was riddled with challenges. The dream of prosperity often clashed with harsh realities. Many settlers arrived with dreams of striking it rich, whether through gold mining or farming. However, the competition was fierce, and the likelihood of success was slim. Picture yourself investing everything you have into a venture, only to find that the land is barren or the mine yields little to no gold. The pressure to succeed weighed heavily on settlers, leading many to despair. Today, we have safety nets, such as unemployment benefits and social services, to help us through difficult times. In contrast, those in the Wild West often had no such support. The financial instability of the era meant that settlers often lived on the brink of poverty. The lack of banks and reliable currency made managing finances complicated. Many relied on bartering, which required a keen understanding of value and negotiation skills. Imagine trying to trade goods without a clear understanding of their worth. The risks involved in such transactions were high, and a poor judgment call could lead to disastrous consequences. The economic uncertainty was a constant backdrop, adding to the overall stress of daily life. Let's also explore the concept of social stratification in the Wild West. While it was a period often associated with the idea of equal opportunity, the reality was far more complicated. Class distinctions were prevalent, with wealthy landowners and merchants wielding significant influence. Those who did not fit into the upper echelons of society often found themselves marginalized. For individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, or those who were not part of the dominant culture, survival could be even more challenging. The opportunities available to them were limited, and the struggle for acceptance in a community that often prioritized wealth and status would be daunting. Moreover, the racial dynamics of the Wild West cannot be overlooked. Indigenous peoples faced displacement and violence as settlers encroached on their lands. For many Native Americans, survival meant navigating a world fraught with hostility and discrimination. The cultural clash between settlers and indigenous populations often resulted in tragic consequences, making coexistence nearly impossible. Imagine having to navigate a society that views you as an outsider, where your very existence is seen as a threat. The psychological toll of such discrimination would be immense, and the struggle for dignity and safety would overshadow daily life. Women in the Wild West faced their own unique set of challenges. While some women managed to carve out independent lives as business owners or homesteaders, the societal norms of the time often relegated them to traditional roles. The expectations placed on women to be homemakers and caregivers were rigid, and those who sought to defy these norms often faced backlash. Consider the limitations placed on women's rights during this period. Without the ability to vote or own property, their autonomy was severely constrained. Many women had to navigate a world that minimized their contributions and potential. The struggle for equality was an uphill battle that would take decades to achieve. In terms of healthcare, the Wild West posed significant risks to survival. The medical knowledge of the time was rudimentary, and access to healthcare was limited. Doctors were few and far between, often lacking formal training or the tools necessary to treat injuries and illnesses effectively. Imagine suffering a simple injury, only to find that the nearest doctor is miles away, and even when you reach him, he may not have the necessary supplies or knowledge to provide adequate care. The fear of untreated wounds and the threat of infections loomed large. Today, we have access to a wealth of medical knowledge and resources. But in the Wild West, a minor ailment could quickly escalate into a life-threatening condition. Additionally, the psychological impact of living in such a tumultuous environment cannot be overstated. The pressures of survival, coupled with the isolation of frontier life, could lead to mental health challenges. The stigma surrounding mental health issues meant that many individuals suffered in silence, unable to seek help or understanding. Imagine grappling with anxiety or depression in a world that demands you to be strong and resilient at all times. The lack of support systems and understanding could lead to a sense of hopelessness, further complicating the struggle for survival. The role of education in the Wild West also played a significant part in shaping one's ability to thrive. Many children had limited access to formal education, particularly in remote areas. The focus was often on survival rather than academic achievement. Consider how this lack of education would impact future generations. Without knowledge of basic literacy, mathematics, and critical thinking skills, the opportunities for advancement would be severely limited. The inability to read or write could hinder one's ability to navigate the complexities of daily life and commerce. Finally, let's ponder the limited access to information. In our modern world, we have instant access to news and data from around the globe. The settlers of the Wild West, however, relied on word of mouth, newspapers, and telegrams for information. The isolation of frontier life meant that news could take weeks to reach certain areas. Imagine living in a world where you are cut off from current events, unaware of potential dangers or opportunities. The lack of reliable information could leave you vulnerable to threats and ill-prepared for the challenges ahead. In conclusion, the Wild West was a complex tapestry of opportunity, hardship, and uncertainty. The challenges of survival were multifaceted, encompassing social, economic, and environmental factors. For the vast majority of us, the skills and knowledge required to navigate this harsh landscape are beyond our grasp. The romanticized tales of cowboys and outlaws often overshadow the stark realities faced by those who lived during this time. Life in the Wild West was not just an adventure, it was a daily struggle for survival. As we reflect on this period in history, it serves as a reminder of the resilience and ingenuity of those who came before us. The Wild West may be a fascinating chapter in our past, but for most of us, it remains a world best left in the pages of history and the frames of film. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. As we continue our discourse on why survival in the Wild West would prove to be an insurmountable challenge for most of us today, let's delve deeper into the complexities of interpersonal relationships and community dynamics that defined life in that era. These relationships were not only essential for emotional support, but were also vital for survival. In a world where danger lurked at every corner, building strong relationships within your community was crucial. Neighbors relied on one another for assistance, whether it was helping to build a barn, sharing food during tough times, or providing companionship in an otherwise lonely existence. But forging these bonds was not always easy. Imagine stepping into a new community where everyone knows each other, and you are merely an outsider. The ability to connect with those around you, to establish trust, and to integrate into an already established social fabric would be a daunting task for anyone. The intricacies of social dynamics were often complicated by historical grievances, rivalries, and prejudices that could span generations. For many, the fear of being ostracized or rejected could prevent them from attempting to build these vital connections. The stakes were high. A strong support network could mean the difference between life and death in times of crisis. Today, we often assume that friendship and community will naturally form, but in the Wild West, this was far from guaranteed. Moreover, the communication methods of the time played a significant role in shaping relationships. News traveled slowly, and misunderstandings could easily escalate into conflicts. The lack of instant communication meant that grievances often festered, leading to disputes that could spiral out of control. Picture yourself in a situation where a neighbor misunderstands an action or comment you made. Without the ability to clarify or resolve the issue quickly, the conflict could grow, potentially leading to violent confrontations. Today, we can easily reach out to friends or family to discuss misunderstandings, but in the Wild West, patience and fortitude were often tested to their limits. Additionally, the role of gender in interpersonal relationships cannot be overlooked. The expectations placed on men and women were rigid, and these roles significantly influenced how individuals interacted within their communities. While some women found ways to assert their independence, many were still confined to traditional roles that limited their opportunities for social engagement. Imagine being a woman who wants to start a business or contribute to the community, but faces resistance from those who believe women should remain in the home. The struggle for agency and respect in such a male-dominated society could be disheartening. The societal norms of the time often dictated that women's voices were not valued as highly as men's, making it difficult for them to forge meaningful connections. Furthermore, let's discuss the psychological impact of living in a region where violence was a common occurrence. The constant threat of conflict could take a toll on one's mental health. The fear of violence, whether from outlaws or even neighbors, could lead to a pervasive sense of anxiety that would be difficult to escape. Consider the toll that such stress would take on your well-being. The ability to cope with fear and anxiety is often tied to access to mental health resources, a luxury that was largely unavailable in the Wild West. Many settlers dealt with their mental health struggles in silence, further compounding their issues and making survival all the more challenging. In terms of emotional resilience, the challenges of frontier life required a level of grit and determination that few possess today. The relentless hardships of daily life, from harsh weather to the threat of violence, would test even the strongest individuals. For those unaccustomed to such pressures, the emotional toll could be overwhelming. Imagine facing loss after loss, whether it be the death of a loved one, the failure of a crop, or the loss of property to bandits. The ability to bounce back from such tragedies is a trait that many people today find difficult to cultivate. The emotional fortitude required to endure such hardships day in and day out would be a monumental task for most. Let's also examine the educational aspect of life in the Wild West. Access to education was often limited, particularly in remote areas. Many children were expected to help with household chores or farm work rather than attend school. The lack of formal education meant that many settlers lacked basic skills that are essential in today's world. Imagine growing up in an environment where you were unable to read or write. The implications of such a limitation would be profound. Navigating contracts, understanding legal documentation, or even communicating effectively with others would present significant hurdles. In a world that increasingly relies on literacy and education, the inability to acquire these skills would place you at a severe disadvantage. Moreover, the lack of educational resources would hinder the ability to pass down knowledge to future generations. The cycle of poverty and ignorance could perpetuate itself, limiting opportunities for advancement and growth within a community. Today, we recognize the importance of education as a pathway to success, but in the Wild West, many children were deprived of this fundamental right. Let's also consider the impact of societal expectations on personal aspirations. The Wild West was home to a diverse array of individuals, each with their own dreams and ambitions. However, the realities of survival often dictated that personal aspirations take a back seat to the demands of daily life. Picture a young person with dreams of exploring the world or pursuing a career in a field of their passion. The harsh realities of frontier life might lead them to abandon those dreams in favor of fulfilling more immediate needs, such as providing for their family or contributing to the community. The pressure to conform to societal expectations could stifle creativity and ambition, leaving many feeling unfulfilled. Additionally, the rigid social hierarchies of the time often made it difficult for individuals to break free from prescribed roles. Those who dared to defy societal norms faced not only ostracization, but also potential violence. The fear of being different or aspiring for something beyond the expected could deter many from pursuing their true passions. The emotional and psychological toll of living in such a constrained environment would be profound. The struggle for identity and fulfillment is a universal human experience. Yet, the challenges faced in the Wild West could make this journey feel nearly impossible. The weight of societal expectations would hang heavily on individuals, leading many to suppress their true selves in the name of survival. Let's also reflect on the role of natural disasters in the Wild West. The unpredictable nature of the environment meant that settlers had to contend with droughts, floods, and other calamities that could devastate crops and communities. The dependence on agriculture made settlers particularly vulnerable to these environmental challenges. Imagine investing time and resources into cultivating a field of crops, only to have a sudden drought wipe out your harvest. The emotional devastation of watching your hard work come to nothing would be overwhelming. Today, we have mechanisms to mitigate the risks associated with natural disasters. But in the Wild West, the impact of such events could be catastrophic. The psychological impact of living with the constant threat of natural disasters would add another layer of stress to an already challenging existence. The fear of what tomorrow might bring could make it difficult to find peace or contentment in daily life. Furthermore, let's not forget the isolation that many settlers experienced. The vastness of the landscape often meant that families were separated by significant distances. The lack of modern transportation made visiting neighbors or friends a difficult task. Imagine living in a remote area, cut off from the world. The loneliness and isolation could take a heavy toll on one's mental health. In a society that thrives on connection and community, the absence of social interaction could lead to despair and hopelessness. In contrast, today's world is interconnected, allowing individuals to maintain relationships despite physical distances. The ability to communicate with loved ones at the touch of a button is a modern convenience that fosters connection and support. In the Wild West, the isolation would have been a suffocating reality for many. In conclusion, the Wild West was a complex and challenging landscape that tested the limits of human endurance and resilience. The interplay of social dynamics, economic pressures, and environmental challenges created a reality that few of us today would be equipped to navigate. The skills required for survival ran deep, encompassing everything from interpersonal relationships to agricultural knowledge, and the emotional toll of living in such a volatile environment was significant. For most of us, the reality of frontier life remains a distant and romanticized vision, far removed from the struggles faced by those who came before us. As we reflect on this period in history, it serves as a reminder of the resilience and ingenuity of those who lived through these challenges. The Wild West may be a captivating chapter in our past, but for most of us, it remains a world best left in the stories we tell and the lessons we learn from history. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. As we delve even deeper into the intricacies of life in the Wild West, it's essential to consider the significant role that conflict and violence played in shaping the everyday experiences of settlers. The Wild West is often romanticized as a land of adventure and opportunity. Yet, it was also a battleground where survival often hinged on one's ability to navigate a landscape rife with danger. The prevalence of violence during this era cannot be overstated. The absence of a robust legal system led to a culture where disputes were often settled with guns rather than words. Imagine living in a world where your safety could be threatened at any moment, where disagreements could escalate into deadly confrontations with little warning. The famous gunfights, immortalized in movies and literature, often overshadow the grim reality that violence was a routine part of life. For most settlers, the need to protect oneself and one's property was paramount. The constant anxiety of potential attacks from outlaws or even rival settlers created a pervasive sense of fear. Consider the psychological toll of living with this constant threat. The stress of potential violence could lead to heightened anxiety and paranoia. The ability to remain calm and collected in such circumstances is a skill that few possess. In our modern lives, we are largely insulated from such dangers. allowing us to focus on personal and professional aspirations. In the Wild West, the struggle for survival was often a more immediate concern. Moreover, the presence of law enforcement was often limited or ineffective. Many towns had a sheriff, but these individuals were often under-resourced and unable to maintain order effectively. In some cases, law enforcement officers were as likely to be corrupt as they were to be protectors. Imagine placing your trust in someone who might be as dangerous as the criminals they were supposed to apprehend. The lack of reliable protection meant that individuals had to take matters into their own hands. The fear of becoming a victim of theft, assault, or even murder would compel many to arm themselves. This need for self-defense transformed ordinary citizens into potential combatants, blurring the lines between protector and aggressor. Additionally, the social fabric of frontier life was often strained by the presence of outlaws. These individuals posed a significant threat to settlers, stealing livestock, robbing stores, and in some cases, committing acts of violence against families. Imagine waking up each day with the knowledge that outlaws could invade your home at any moment, stealing your hard-earned possessions and leaving you vulnerable. The tales of infamous outlaws like Jesse James and Billy the Kid are well known, but for every notorious figure, countless lesser-known criminals roamed the landscape. Their actions instilled fear in the hearts of settlers, creating an atmosphere where suspicion and hostility prevailed. For many, the specter of violence was a constant companion, making it difficult to build trust within communities. Furthermore, let's consider the role of diseases and health crises during this time. Medical knowledge was rudimentary at best, and access to healthcare was limited. In the Wild West, even minor injuries could become life-threatening due to infections or complications. Imagine suffering a simple cut or scrape while working on your homestead, only to find that the nearest doctor is miles away. Without access to antibiotics or modern medical care, what might have been a minor issue could quickly escalate into a serious health crisis. The fear of illness loomed large, and many settlers faced the grim reality that a simple infection could lead to death. Moreover, the lack of understanding of sanitation and hygiene practices further compounded these challenges. Many settlers lived in close quarters with livestock, and the lack of clean drinking water could lead to the spread of disease. The threat of cholera, smallpox, and other illnesses created an environment where survival was not just about physical strength, but also about navigating the complexities of health and wellness. The emotional toll of living under such precarious conditions could lead to significant mental health challenges. The constant stress of survival, coupled with the fear of illness or injury, could result in anxiety and depression. The stigma surrounding mental health during this time meant that many individuals suffered in silence, unable to seek help or support. Additionally, let's address the issue of food security in the Wild West. While many settlers aspired to be self-sufficient through farming or ranching, the realities of agriculture during this time were fraught with challenges. The landscape was often unforgiving, with droughts, pests, and unpredictable weather patterns wreaking havoc on crops. Imagine investing time and resources into planting a field of crops, only to have a sudden drought wipe out the harvest. The emotional devastation of watching your hard work come to nothing would be overwhelming. Today, we have safety nets and support systems to help mitigate the risks of food insecurity. But in the Wild West, settlers often had no choice but to endure. The dietary restrictions that settlers faced also posed a significant challenge. Many relied on a narrow range of foods, and the lack of access to fresh produce meant that nutritional deficiencies were common. The ability to forage for edible plants or hunt for game was crucial, yet many individuals lacked the necessary skills to obtain food reliably. Additionally, let's consider the issue of trade and commerce. The economy in the Wild West was often unstable, and many settlers faced challenges in securing necessary supplies. The lack of infrastructure meant that goods had to be transported over long distances, which could lead to delays and shortages. Imagine living in a world where basic necessities like flour, sugar, or medicine could be scarce. The pressure to barter and negotiate for goods would add another layer of complexity to daily life. In today's world, we take for granted the ability to purchase what we need with relative ease. But in the Wild West, the struggle for basic provisions could feel insurmountable. Furthermore, let's address the role of family and kinship ties in survival. In the Wild West, families often relied on one another for support, whether it was helping with work on the homestead or providing emotional encouragement during difficult times. However, the challenges of frontier life often strained these relationships. Imagine facing the loss of a family member due to illness or violence. The grief and burden of such a loss could fracture familial bonds, making it difficult to come together in times of need. The emotional toll of navigating relationships in such a volatile environment could lead to feelings of isolation and despair. Additionally, the role of gender within families often dictated the dynamics of survival. Women faced societal expectations that limited their autonomy and opportunities. While many women played crucial roles in supporting their families, their contributions were often undervalued. Consider the struggle of a woman who wants to break free from traditional roles, seeking independence and opportunity. The societal norms of the time could stifle her aspirations, leaving her feeling trapped and unfulfilled. The emotional toll of navigating these expectations would be immense, as women were often left with little recourse to pursue their own dreams. The cultural and ethnic diversity of the Wild West also played a significant role in shaping the experiences of settlers. The interactions between various groups, European immigrants, Native Americans, and others, created a complex social landscape. Imagine being part of a marginalized community facing discrimination and hostility from those in power. The struggle for acceptance and safety could overshadow daily life, making it difficult to thrive. The lack of understanding and empathy between different groups could lead to conflict and division, further complicating the quest for survival. Additionally, let's consider the impact of societal norms and expectations on personal identity. The Wild West was a time when individuals were often defy their roles within their communities. The pressure to conform to societal standards could lead many to suppress their true selves, sacrificing their authenticity for acceptance. Imagine living in a world where your worth is measured by your ability to fulfill prescribed roles. The struggle to assert one's identity in such an environment could be exhausting. Today, we often celebrate individuality and diversity, but in the Wild West, the pressure to conform could stifle personal expression and growth. The exploration of personal identity leads us to the issue of self-reliance. The Wild West was characterized by a strong ethos of individualism and self-sufficiency. While these qualities can be admirable, they often came with the expectation that individuals should be able to handle everything on their own. Consider the burden of self-reliance in a world where help is scarce. The pressure to be strong and resilient could lead to feelings of inadequacy for those unable to meet these expectations. The emphasis on independence could create a culture of isolation, where individuals felt they had to fend for themselves without support. Furthermore, the harsh realities of frontier life often meant that people had to make difficult moral choices in the name of survival. The pressure to protect one's family or property could lead to actions that, under different circumstances, might be considered unethical. Imagine facing a situation where you must choose between doing what is right and ensuring your family's safety. The moral dilemmas faced by settlers were complex and often left individuals grappling with guilt and remorse. This internal conflict could create a heavy emotional burden, complicating the struggle for survival. In conclusion, the Wild West presented a landscape fraught with challenges that would be insurmountable for most people today. The interplay of violence, health crises, food insecurity, family dynamics, and societal expectations created a reality that tested the limits of human endurance. As we reflect on this period in history, it serves as a reminder of the resilience and ingenuity of those who lived through these challenges. The Wild West may be a captivating chapter in our past, but for most of us, it remains a world best left in the stories we tell and the lessons we learn from history. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. continuing our exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a formidable challenge for most of us today. Let's delve into the harsh realities of the physical environment that settlers faced. The landscape of the Wild West was not only vast, but also incredibly diverse, presenting unique challenges that would test the limits of human endurance. First, let's consider the terrain. The Wild West encompassed deserts, mountains, plains, and forests, each presenting its own set of difficulties. Imagine attempting to traverse a landscape where the terrain could shift from rocky mountains to arid deserts in a matter of miles. The physical toll of navigating such varied environments would be immense. For those unfamiliar with the geography, the risks of getting lost or disoriented would be high. The lack of reliable maps or navigational tools meant that settlers had to rely on their instincts and knowledge of the land. Today, we can pull up GPS on our phones or use digital maps to guide us. But in the Wild West, travelers often had to depend on landmarks and their ability to read the signs of nature. Consider the physical demands of setting out on a journey. The need to carry supplies, food, water, tools, would add significant weight to one's load. In an environment where resources were scarce, the importance of conserving energy and managing supplies was paramount. The challenge of balancing the need to bring enough provisions while not overburdening oneself would be a constant struggle. Moreover, the climate of the Wild West was notoriously unpredictable. Settlers faced extreme temperatures, ranging from scorching heat in the summer to freezing cold in the winter. Imagine enduring a blistering summer day where temperatures soar above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, only to be followed by a frigid winter night that could drop well below freezing. The ability to adapt to such drastic temperature swings would be essential for survival. In the face of such extremes, the knowledge of how to dress appropriately and manage one's body heat would be crucial. The settlers who thrived were often those who understood the importance of layering clothing, choosing fabrics that allowed for breathability in the heat and insulation in the cold. For many today who have grown accustomed to climate-controlled environments, this level of adaptation would be daunting. Additionally, the lack of modern conveniences, such as heating, cooling, and insulation, meant that settlers had to rely on their ingenuity. Imagine having to build a fire every night for warmth, gathering wood and maintaining the fire to ensure it burned through the night. The physical labor involved in such tasks would be exhausting, especially after a long day of work. Water scarcity was another significant concern in the Wild West. Many areas were arid, and access to clean drinking water could be a daunting challenge. The need to locate and secure water sources was vital for survival, as dehydration could set in quickly, especially during hot summer months. Picture yourself on a long journey, with your water supply dwindling. The anxiety of searching for a reliable water source could be overwhelming. Today, we take for granted the ability to turn on a tap and access clean water. But in the Wild West, the struggle to find water was a daily reality for many. Furthermore, the challenges of farming in the Wild West cannot be overlooked. Many settlers aspired to cultivate land, but the harsh conditions often made farming a gamble. The soil quality varied widely, and the threat of drought loomed large. Imagine investing time and resources into planting crops, only to have a drought ruin your harvest. The knowledge required to farm successfully in such a challenging environment was often passed down through generations. The settlers who thrived were those who understood the intricacies of their land, from planting seasons to irrigation techniques. For many today, the concept of farming is abstract, removed from our daily lives. The physical demands of tilling soil, planting seeds, and harvesting crops would be an arduous task that few of us would readily embrace. Moreover, the threat of pests and diseases could devastate crops, leaving families without food or income. The lack of modern agricultural practices and pest control meant that settlers had to rely on their knowledge of natural remedies and traditional practices to protect their harvest. The inability to combat such threats effectively could lead to food insecurity, a reality that many settlers faced regularly. The physical labor required for survival in the Wild West extended beyond farming and water collection. Daily tasks often involved strenuous work, from building homes to tending livestock. The settlers who thrived were those who possessed not only the physical strength, but also the endurance to withstand the rigors of frontier life. Consider the effort involved in constructing a home from scratch. Many settlers built their own houses from logs or sod, a process that required significant physical labor and craftsmanship. The skills necessary to build a home were not universally possessed, and for those lacking experience, the task could be overwhelming. Imagine working tirelessly under the hot sun, only to find that your efforts were not yielding the desired results. The frustration of trying to build a secure shelter in an unforgiving environment could lead to feelings of despair. Today, we have access to modern building techniques and materials, but in the Wild West, the struggle to create a safe and secure home was a monumental task. The realities of livestock management also presented unique challenges. Many settlers relied on cattle, sheep, and other animals for food, labor, and companionship. The knowledge required to care for and manage livestock was extensive. Understanding animal behavior, nutrition, and health was crucial for success. Picture yourself responsible for a herd of cattle in a vast and open range. The physical demands of herding, feeding, and caring for these animals would be immense. The threat of losing livestock to predators or environmental conditions added another layer of stress. The responsibility of ensuring the health and safety of your animals would weigh heavily on your shoulders. Furthermore, the emotional bond between settlers and their livestock played a significant role in daily life. Animals were not just commodities, they were often seen as part of the family. The loss of a beloved animal could lead to profound grief, further complicating the challenges of survival. The social dynamics of the Wild West also contributed to the difficulties of survival. While communities often banded together for mutual support, the reality of interpersonal conflicts could lead to division and strife. The pressure to conform to social norms, coupled with the fear of ostracization, could create an environment where individuals felt isolated and unsupported. Imagine living in a community where trust was hard to come by. The fear of betrayal or conflict could prevent individuals from seeking help when they needed it most. In today's interconnected world, we often find solace in shared experiences and support networks, but in the Wild West, the struggle for survival could lead to feelings of loneliness and despair. Moreover, the lack of access to information and education limited opportunities for personal growth and development. Many settlers faced significant barriers in accessing education, particularly in remote areas. The emphasis on survival often meant that children were expected to contribute to household chores rather than attend school. Consider the implications of such limitations on future generations. The cycle of poverty and ignorance could perpetuate itself, hindering progress and opportunity. Today, we understand the importance of education as a means of breaking free from the constraints of one's circumstances. But in the Wild West, many children were deprived of this fundamental right. The complexities of daily life in the Wild West also included cultural and ethnic tensions. The interactions between diverse groups, settlers, indigenous peoples, and immigrants, created a dynamic and often fraught social landscape. The prevalence of discrimination and prejudice could lead to conflict and division, further complicating the struggle for survival. Imagine being part of a marginalized community facing hostility from those in power. The struggle for acceptance and safety could overshadow daily life, making it difficult to thrive. The lack of understanding and empathy between different groups often resulted in violent confrontations, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. As we reflect on these challenges, it becomes clear that the Wild West was not simply a backdrop for adventure. It was a harsh and unyielding reality that tested the limits of human endurance. The interplay of environmental challenges, social dynamics, and personal struggles created a landscape where survival was never guaranteed. In conclusion, the Wild West presented a myriad of challenges that would be insurmountable for most people today. The harsh physical environment, coupled with the emotional and social complexities of frontier life, created a reality that tested the limits of resilience and ingenuity. As we look back on this period in history, it serves as a reminder of the strength and determination of those who lived through these challenges. The Wild West may be a captivating chapter in our past, but for most of us, it remains a world best left in the pages of history and the frames of film. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and cherish the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. Continuing our exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a formidable challenge for most of us today, we must turn our attention to the intricate web of social hierarchies and the cultural expectations that defined life on the frontier. The social landscape was complex, filled with layers of privilege, prejudice, and power dynamics that could spell the difference between life and death for many individuals. To start, let's examine the role of race and ethnicity in shaping experiences in the Wild West. The era was marked by significant conflict and tension between various groups, including European settlers, Native Americans, and immigrants from Asia and Mexico. The interactions between these communities were often fraught with misunderstanding, fear, and hostility. Imagine being a part of a marginalized group, trying to carve out a place for yourself in a society that views you with suspicion or outright hostility. The racism that pervaded the culture could lead to violence, displacement, and exclusion. For many Native Americans, the encroachment of settlers on their lands meant a struggle for survival against overwhelming odds. The constant threat of violence and the loss of ancestral lands created a climate of fear and despair. Furthermore, the treatment of Asian immigrants, particularly the Chinese laborers who helped build the Transcontinental Railroad, is a stark reminder of the discrimination that existed during this period. Many faced violence and exclusion from communities, which made survival even more precarious. If you were part of a group that faced such systemic racism, your chances of thriving in this environment would be severely compromised. For women, the challenges were just as daunting. While some women found ways to assert their independence and build successful lives as business owners or homesteaders, many were still subjected to societal norms that dictated their roles. Imagine living in a world where your aspirations and ambitions are dismissed simply because of your gender. The pressure to conform to traditional expectations could stifle creativity and independence, leaving many women feeling trapped. Consider the emotional toll of living in a society that devalued your contributions. The struggle for recognition and respect was an uphill battle for many women in the Wild West. The lack of rights, such as the right to vote or own property, further complicated their ability to forge a path for themselves. This systemic inequality would create a reality where survival was often a matter of enduring societal constraints rather than thriving. Moreover, the concept of family and kinship played a crucial role in survival during this time. Settlers often relied on their families and extended networks for support, but the harsh realities of frontier life could lead to fragmentation. Imagine facing the loss of a family member due to illness or violence. The grief and burden of such a loss could fracture familial bonds and make it difficult to come together in times of need. The emotional toll of navigating relationships in such a volatile environment could lead to feelings of isolation and despair. Today, we often find solace in shared experiences and support networks, but in the Wild West, the struggle for survival could lead to a sense of loneliness that was difficult to escape. The pressure to remain strong and resilient could prevent individuals from seeking help when they needed it most. Additionally, let's discuss the impact of social status and wealth on survival in the Wild West. The era was characterized by significant disparities in wealth and power, with wealthy landowners and merchants often wielding considerable influence. The social hierarchy could create barriers for those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, making it difficult to access resources and opportunities. Imagine being a poor settler, struggling to make ends meet while watching wealthier neighbors thrive. The frustration and resentment that could arise from such inequities would be palpable. The lack of upward mobility meant that many were trapped in a cycle of poverty, unable to improve their circumstances. Today, we recognize the importance of economic opportunity as a pathway to success, but in the Wild West, many faced insurmountable barriers. The cultural expectations of the time also shaped individuals' experiences. The emphasis on rugged individualism and self-reliance meant that asking for help could be viewed as a sign of weakness. Imagine living in a society that values strength and independence above all else. The pressure to conform to these ideals could lead to feelings of inadequacy for those who were unable to meet such expectations. The stigma surrounding vulnerability and emotional struggle further complicated the quest for survival. Many settlers grappled with mental health challenges, yet the lack of understanding and support meant that they often suffered in silence. The isolation of frontier life, combined with the pressure to remain strong, could create a profound sense of despair. Let's also consider the impact of community dynamics on survival. While communities often banded together for mutual support, interpersonal conflicts could lead to division and strife. The pressure to conform to social norms, coupled with the fear of ostracization, could create an environment where individuals felt isolated and unsupported. Imagine living in a community where trust was hard to come by. The fear of betrayal or conflict could prevent individuals from seeking help when they needed it most. In today's interconnected world, we often find solace in shared experiences and support networks. But in the Wild West, the struggle for survival could lead to feelings of loneliness and despair. Furthermore, the issue of education and access to information played a significant role in shaping opportunities. Many settlers faced significant barriers to education, particularly in remote areas. The emphasis on survival often meant that children were expected to contribute to household chores rather than attend school. Consider the implications of such limitations on future generations. The cycle of poverty and ignorance could perpetuate itself, hindering progress and opportunity. Today, we understand the importance of education as a means of breaking free from the constraints of one's circumstances. But in the Wild West, many children were deprived of this fundamental right. The complexities of daily life in the Wild West also included cultural and ethnic tensions. The interactions between diverse groups, settlers, indigenous peoples, and immigrants, created a dynamic and often fraught social landscape. The prevalence of discrimination and prejudice could lead to conflict and division, further complicating the struggle for survival. Imagine being part of a marginalized community facing hostility from those in power. The struggle for acceptance and safety could overshadow daily life, making it difficult to thrive. The lack of understanding and empathy between different groups often resulted in violent confrontations, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Additionally, let's examine the psychological impact of living in a world defined by conflict and tension. The constant threat of violence, coupled with the pressures of survival, could lead to significant mental health challenges. The stigma surrounding mental health issues meant that many individuals suffered in silence, unable to seek help or understanding. Imagine grappling with anxiety or depression in a world that demands you to be strong and resilient at all times. The emotional toll of navigating these challenges could be overwhelming, leading to feelings of hopelessness and despair. The inability to access mental health resources or support systems further complicated the struggle for survival. The environmental challenges of the Wild West also played a significant role in shaping experiences. The landscape was often unforgiving, with harsh weather, unpredictable terrain, and limited resources posing constant threats. The knowledge required to navigate such a diverse environment was extensive, and those who thrived were often those who understood the intricacies of their land. Picture yourself facing the elements: bitter cold in the winter, scorching heat in the summer, and unpredictable storms that could devastate crops. The ability to adapt to such drastic changes in climate would be essential for survival. Today, we have access to technology and resources that allow us to weather such challenges with relative ease. But in the Wild West, settlers had to rely on their instincts and knowledge. Moreover, the lack of infrastructure meant that many communities were isolated from essential services. Imagine being cut off from medical care, education, or basic necessities. The struggle to access healthcare during an illness or injury could be a matter of life and death. The absence of modern transportation and communication systems meant that help could be far away, compounding the difficulties faced by settlers. The realities of food security also posed a significant challenge. Many settlers aspired to cultivate land, but the harsh conditions often made farming a gamble. The soil quality varied widely, and the threat of drought loomed large. Imagine investing time and resources into planting crops, only to have a sudden drought ruin your harvest. The dietary restrictions that settlers faced also posed a significant challenge. Many relied on a narrow range of foods, and the lack of access to fresh produce meant that nutritional deficiencies were common. The ability to forage for edible plants or hunt for game was crucial, yet many individuals lacked the necessary skills to obtain food reliably. As we reflect on these challenges, it becomes clear that the Wild West was not simply a backdrop for adventure. It was a harsh and unyielding reality that tested the limits of human endurance. The interplay of environmental challenges, social dynamics, and personal struggles created a landscape where survival was never guaranteed. In conclusion, the Wild West presented a myriad of challenges that would be insurmountable for most people today. The harsh physical environment, coupled with the emotional and social complexities of frontier life, created a reality that tested the limits of resilience and ingenuity. As we look back on this period in history, it serves as a reminder of the strength and determination of those who lived through these challenges. The Wild West may be a captivating chapter in our past, but for most of us, it remains a world best left in the pages of history and the frames of film. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and cherish the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. As we delve further into the challenges of survival in the Wild West, it's essential to focus on the role of community, or the lack thereof, in shaping the experiences of settlers. While the ideal of the self-sufficient pioneer is often romanticized, the reality was much more complex. The dynamics of community life were fraught with tension, conflict, and the ever-present shadow of isolation, which could make survival exceedingly difficult. The concept of community in the Wild West was one of necessity, born out of the harsh realities of frontier life. Settlers often depended on their neighbors for support, whether in the form of helping hands during harvest time or communal efforts to build homes. However, building a sense of community was not always straightforward. Imagine arriving in a new settlement, eager to integrate into the social fabric, but finding yourself met with suspicion and distrust. The rugged individualism that characterized the era often meant that people were cautious about forming close bonds. The fear of betrayal or conflict could lead to a reluctance to trust others fully. This hesitance to form alliances could hinder one's ability to thrive in a challenging environment. Additionally, conflicts within communities were not uncommon. Disputes over resources, land, or personal grievances could escalate quickly. The absence of a reliable legal system meant that many disagreements were settled with violence rather than dialogue. Imagine living in a community where a minor disagreement could lead to a shootout, knowing that your safety was at the mercy of interpersonal conflicts. The constant threat of violence could create a pervasive atmosphere of anxiety. Moreover, the social hierarchies that existed within communities often dictated one's experience. Those with wealth or influence held power, while those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds struggled to be heard. Imagine trying to advocate for your family or your rights in a society that prioritizes wealth and status. The uphill battle for recognition and respect would be a daunting challenge for anyone, leaving many feeling marginalized and voiceless. The role of women in these communities adds another layer of complexity. While some women carved out independent lives, many were still confined to traditional roles that limited their opportunities. Imagine being a woman with aspirations of contributing to your community through business or activism, only to be met with resistance from those who believe women should remain in the home. The societal expectations placed on women could stifle creativity and ambition, making it difficult to pursue one's dreams. The emotional toll of navigating these dynamics could lead to significant mental health challenges. The pressure to conform to societal norms and the fear of ostracization could create feelings of inadequacy. Today, we recognize the importance of mental health and the need for support. But in the Wild West, many individuals suffered in silence, unable to seek help or understanding. In addition to interpersonal dynamics, The physical environment of the Wild West played a crucial role in shaping the experiences of settlers. The harsh landscapes presented numerous challenges, from extreme weather conditions to treacherous terrain. Consider the physical demands of navigating such an environment. The vastness of the West meant that travel could be arduous and time-consuming. Imagine setting out on a journey, carrying supplies for days on end, only to face unpredictable weather or difficult terrain. The exhaustion from such travel could take a significant toll on one's health and well-being. Moreover, the reality of farming in the Wild West was fraught with difficulties. Many settlers aspired to cultivate land, yet the soil quality varied widely, and the threat of drought loomed large. Imagine investing time and resources into planting crops, only to have a sudden drought ruin your harvest. The emotional devastation of watching your hard work come to nothing would be overwhelming. The dietary restrictions that settlers faced also posed a significant challenge. Many relied on a narrow range of foods, and the lack of access to fresh produce meant that nutritional deficiencies were common. The ability to forage for edible plants or hunt for game was crucial, yet many individuals lacked the necessary skills to obtain food reliably. Imagine trying to sustain your family only to find that your food sources are limited and unreliable. Furthermore, the lack of access to medical care compounded the challenges faced by settlers. The medical knowledge of the time was rudimentary, and access to health care was limited. Imagine suffering from a simple injury or illness, only to find that the nearest doctor is miles away. The fear of lingering health issues or untreated ailments could become a constant source of anxiety. Additionally, the psychological impact of living in such a volatile environment cannot be overstated. The constant threat of violence, coupled with the pressures of survival, could lead to significant mental health challenges. The stigma surrounding mental health meant that many individuals suffered in silence, unable to seek help or understanding. Imagine grappling with depression or anxiety in a world that demands you to be strong and resilient at all times. The emotional toll of navigating these challenges could be overwhelming. Moreover, the absence of modern communication and transportation infrastructure meant that settlers often felt isolated. The vast distances between towns and the limited means of communication made it difficult to stay connected with loved ones. Imagine living in a world where news traveled slowly and you were cut off from the support of family and friends. The isolation could lead to feelings of loneliness and despair, further complicating the struggle for survival. In addition to these personal and communal challenges, the Wild West was characterized by economic instability. The economy was often unpredictable, and many settlers faced significant barriers to financial success. Imagine investing everything you have into a venture, only to find that the market crashes or the land fails to yield crops. The pressure to succeed financially weighed heavily on settlers, leading many to despair. The lack of access to financial resources and support systems meant that individuals often had to rely on their ingenuity and resourcefulness. The ability to barter and negotiate for goods was essential. Yet many individuals lacked the necessary skills to engage in commerce effectively. Imagine trying to trade goods without a clear understanding of their value. The risks involved in such transactions were high, and a poor judgment call could lead to disastrous consequences. The cultural expectations of the time also shaped individuals' experiences. The emphasis on rugged individualism and self-reliance meant that asking for help could be viewed as a sign of weakness. Imagine living in a society that values strength and independence above all else. The pressure to conform to these ideals could lead to feelings of inadequacy for those who were unable to meet such expectations. The stigma surrounding vulnerability and emotional struggle further complicated the quest for survival. Many settlers grappled with internal conflicts, yet the lack of understanding and support meant that they often suffered in silence. The emotional burden of navigating such challenges could create a heavy weight on individuals, further complicating their ability to thrive. The physical landscape of the Wild West was not only unforgiving, but also riddled with hazards. The presence of wildlife, including snakes, bears, and mountain lions, posed a constant threat. Imagine venturing out to gather firewood or hunt for food, only to encounter a dangerous animal. The need to stay vigilant and aware of one's surroundings was crucial for survival. The threat of natural disasters, such as floods, fires, and droughts, also loomed large in the lives of settlers. The unpredictability of the environment meant that settlers had to be prepared for anything. Imagine investing your time and resources into building a home, only to have it destroyed by a sudden flood or wildfire. The emotional devastation of such losses would be profound, compounding the challenges of survival. As we consider the broad spectrum of challenges faced by those in the Wild West, it becomes increasingly clear that survival was not merely a matter of physical strength or resilience. It was also about navigating complex social dynamics and overcoming systemic barriers. The interplay of environmental pressures, interpersonal relationships, and societal expectations created a reality that was fraught with difficulty. In conclusion, the Wild West was a place where survival required a delicate balance of skills, knowledge, and emotional fortitude. The harsh realities of daily life, coupled with the complexities of community dynamics and the ever-present threat of violence, created an environment where few could thrive. As we reflect on this period in history, it serves as a reminder of the strength and determination of those who lived through these challenges. The Wild West may be a captivating chapter in our past, but for most of us, it remains a world best left in the stories we tell and the lessons we learn from history. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and cherish the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. As we delve deeper into the myriad reasons why survival in the Wild West would be a formidable challenge, we must turn our attention to the aspects of resource scarcity and the impact of isolation that characterized life on the frontier. The Wild West was not just a place of opportunity, it was also a harsh environment where resources were limited and survival often hinged on one's ability to adapt and endure. At the heart of the survival struggle in the Wild West was the issue of resource scarcity. The vast expanses of land that settlers moved into were often uncharted and unpredictable. While the allure of fertile land and untapped resources drew many hopeful settlers westward, the reality was that the land could be unforgiving. Imagine arriving in a new territory, brimming with dreams of prosperity, only to find that the land is barren or overrun with pests. Many settlers aspired to cultivate crops, yet they often faced challenges such as poor soil quality, droughts, and the threat of floods. The unpredictability of nature could mean that a season of hard work could yield little to no return. Consider the emotional toll of such circumstances. The investment of time, energy, and resources into farming was significant. When crops failed, it was not just a financial loss, it was a blow to one's hopes and dreams. For many, the struggle to put food on the table was an ever-present anxiety. Today, we have systems in place to mitigate agricultural risks, but in the Wild West, farmers had to rely on their knowledge of the land, and even the best-laid plans could go awry. Additionally, access to fresh water was crucial for survival. Many areas in the West were arid, and the struggle to locate and secure clean drinking water could become a daily ordeal. Imagine embarking on a journey across the desert, only to find that the water supply you thought would sustain you has run dry. The fear of dehydration could lead to panic, and the physical effects of insufficient water intake, fatigue, disorientation could quickly escalate. Now, let's not overlook the challenges posed by the limited availability of medical resources. The medical knowledge of the time was rudimentary, and access to healthcare was scarce. Imagine suffering from a minor injury, only to find that there is no doctor within 100 miles. The fear of untreated ailments loomed large. A simple cut could become infected, leading to serious health complications. This reality meant that settlers had to be self-sufficient in their healthcare, often relying on home remedies passed down through generations. Isolation and community dynamics. The sense of isolation that characterized life in the Wild West was another significant barrier to survival. While communities did exist, they were often small and dispersed, with vast distances separating families and neighbors. The lack of modern transportation and communication meant that reaching out for help could be a daunting task. Imagine living in a remote homestead, cut off from the world around you. The nearest neighbor could be miles away, and the thought of navigating treacherous terrain for help would be overwhelming. The isolation could lead to feelings of loneliness and despair, making it difficult to muster the strength needed to confront daily challenges. Furthermore, the dynamics of community life could be fraught with tension. While mutual support was essential for survival, interpersonal conflicts could quickly escalate. Disputes over land, resources, or personal grievances could lead to violence, creating an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. Imagine living in a community where a simple disagreement could lead to a deadly confrontation. The constant anxiety of potential violence would weigh heavily on one's psyche. The struggle for social acceptance also played a crucial role in the survival of individuals on the frontier. Settlers often faced pressure to conform to societal norms and expectations. Those who were different, whether due to their ethnicity, gender, or background, could find themselves marginalized or ostracized. Imagine being a woman in a society that expects you to fulfill traditional roles, only to yearn for independence and recognition. The battle for respect and acceptance could overshadow any attempts to thrive. Moreover, the lack of access to education further complicated the landscape of survival. Many children in the Wild West were expected to contribute to household chores rather than attend school. The emphasis on survival meant that education often took a back seat. Imagine growing up without the opportunity to learn basic literacy or numeracy skills. The implications of such limitations would be profound, hindering one's ability to navigate the complexities of daily life and commerce. The psychological toll of frontier life. The psychological toll of living in such an unstable environment cannot be overstated. The constant threat of violence, coupled with the pressures of survival, could lead to significant mental health challenges. The stigma surrounding mental health issues meant that many individuals suffered in silence, unable to seek help or understanding. Imagine grappling with anxiety or depression in a world that demands you to be strong and resilient at all times. The emotional toll of navigating these challenges could be overwhelming. The weight of expectations could lead individuals to suppress their vulnerabilities, further complicating their struggles. Today, we recognize the importance of mental health and the need for support. But in the Wild West, individuals often had to endure their battles alone. Moreover, the daily grind of survival could lead to burnout and exhaustion. The physical demands of life on the frontier were significant, requiring laborious work from dawn until dusk. Imagine the toll of long days spent farming, hunting, or building, with little time for rest or recovery. The relentless cycle of work without adequate respite could lead to physical and emotional fatigue, making it difficult to maintain the motivation needed to persevere. Violence and lawlessness. The ever-present threat of violence was a grim reality for many settlers. The lack of a reliable legal system meant that disputes were often settled with guns rather than words. Imagine living in a community where the sheriff is either corrupt or unable to maintain order. The fear of becoming a victim of theft, assault, or even murder would loom large. Consider the stories of infamous outlaws and gunfights that punctuated the era. While these tales have been romanticized in films and literature, the reality of violence was often tragic and brutal. Settlers had to be constantly vigilant, aware that danger could come from any direction. The psychological toll of living with such fear could lead to heightened anxiety and paranoia, making it difficult to find peace or security. Moreover, the social dynamics of violence could lead to cycles of retribution and revenge. The pressure to protect oneself and one's family could lead individuals to take matters into their own hands, further perpetuating a culture of violence. Imagine being caught in a cycle of retaliation, where each act of aggression sets off a chain reaction of conflict. The sense of safety would be elusive, and survival could become a daily battle. Coping mechanisms and community solutions. In the face of such overwhelming challenges, settlers had to develop coping mechanisms and strategies for survival. Many turned to religion and spirituality as a source of strength and comfort. The belief in a higher power provided solace during difficult times, offering hope in an uncertain world. Communities often came together in times of crisis to support one another, creating a sense of solidarity in the face of adversity. Imagine participating in community gatherings where shared stories and experiences fostered connections and resilience. These moments of unity could help mitigate the isolation faced by many settlers. However, the effectiveness of such support systems varied widely depending on the community dynamics and the social fabric in place. Additionally, the formation of cooperatives and mutual aid societies became vital for survival in some areas. These organizations allowed settlers to pool resources and share knowledge, providing a safety net in times of need. Imagine being part of a cooperative that helps to provide food, medical care, and support during challenging seasons. Such networks could make a significant difference in the lives of individuals struggling to survive. Conclusion. In summary, the Wild West was a place where survival demanded more than just physical strength or determination. It required navigating complex social dynamics, coping with resource scarcity, and overcoming the psychological toll of living in a volatile environment. The interplay of these factors created a reality that was fraught with difficulty and uncertainty. As we reflect on this period in history, we gain insight into the resilience and ingenuity of those who lived through these challenges. The stories of survival in the Wild West serve as a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure, adapt, and ultimately thrive against the odds. However, for most of us today, the challenges faced by those in the Wild West remain daunting and insurmountable. The modern conveniences we often take for granted, access to education, healthcare, and social support, are luxuries that would have made a significant difference in the lives of frontier settlers. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. As we continue to dissect the numerous challenges that would make survival in the Wild West exceedingly difficult for most of us today, let us focus on the impact of technological limitations, the harsh realities of everyday life, and the nuances of cultural interactions that defined the frontier era. Technological limitations. In our modern age, we rely heavily on technology to navigate our daily lives. From smartphones to advanced agricultural machinery, these tools make survival and day-to-day activities considerably easier. In the Wild West, however, technology was rudimentary at best, and many of the conveniences we take for granted simply did not exist. Transportation challenges. First, consider the transportation technology of the time. While the horse was the primary mode of transport, it was not without its limitations. Imagine needing to travel long distances to fetch supplies or seek medical care, only to find that your horse is tired or unwell. The notion of hopping into a car or taking a quick flight to reach your destination is a luxury that settlers could only dream of. Moreover, the roads were often little more than trails, winding through rugged terrain. The absence of proper infrastructure meant that travel could be slow, dangerous, and unpredictable. Storms could wash out roads, while rough terrain could lead to injuries or accidents. The risk of being stranded in the wilderness without proper supplies or knowledge of the land would be a constant concern for most settlers. Communication barriers. In addition to transportation, the communication technology of the Wild West was painfully slow by today's standards. Settlers relied on letters, which could take weeks or even months to reach their destination. Imagine trying to coordinate a plan or share important news with loved ones while being entirely cut off from immediate communication. The anxiety of not knowing whether your family was safe or if help was on the way could be overwhelming. Today, we have instant access to information and the ability to communicate with anyone around the globe at the touch of a button. In the Wild West, however, the isolation created by limited communication could lead to feelings of despair. The inability to quickly reach out for help or connect with others would make survival even more precarious. Medical technology. When considering survival, one cannot overlook the medical technology, or lack thereof, in the Wild West. The understanding of medicine at that time was rudimentary, and many settlers lacked access to even the most basic medical care. The closest doctor could be miles away, and even when located, that doctor might have limited training and resources. Imagine suffering from an illness or injury without access to modern medicine or even a qualified physician. Simple ailments could escalate into life-threatening conditions. For instance, an untreated infection from a small cut could lead to sepsis, potentially resulting in death. Today, we have antibiotics and advanced medical treatments that have drastically improved health outcomes. But in the Wild West, a minor issue could easily become fatal. The psychological impact of this reality cannot be overstated. Living with the constant fear of illness and injury, knowing that help may be far away and inadequate, would create an environment of anxiety and stress that few could endure. The harsh realities of everyday life. The daily life of a settler in the Wild West was filled with laborious tasks, and the demands of maintaining a homestead were immense. Today, many of us enjoy the convenience of appliances and services that make life easier, but those comforts were non-existent in the 19th century. Labor-intensive work. Consider the physical demands of homesteading. From dawn until dusk, settlers worked tirelessly to maintain their farms, raise livestock, and build shelters. The labor was grueling and often required a diverse skill set. Imagine waking up early to tend to animals, plow fields, and perform household chores, only to repeat the cycle day in and day out. The sheer physical exhaustion from such relentless work would wear down even the most resilient individuals. Moreover, the lack of modern convenience meant that many tasks took significantly longer to complete. Cooking meals, for example, involved gathering firewood, boiling water, and preparing food from scratch. The luxury of pre-packaged or readily available food was a distant dream. For those unaccustomed to such labor-intensive lifestyles, the demands of daily life would be overwhelming. The psychological toll of fatigue and relentless work could lead to burnout and despair. Today, we often seek work-life balance and leisure time, but in the Wild West, the concept of rest was often relegated to the back burner of survival. Food security and nutrition. Food security was a constant concern for settlers. The ability to grow, hunt, or forage for food was essential, yet many faced challenges in securing enough nourishment. Imagine the anxiety of watching your crops fail or your livestock perish, knowing that your family's survival depended on your ability to provide. The dietary restrictions of the time also posed significant challenges. Many settlers relied on a limited range of foods, often resulting in nutritional deficiencies. The lack of fresh fruits and vegetables, particularly in isolated areas, could lead to scurvy or malnutrition. Today, we have access to a wide variety of foods and resources that promote health, but in the Wild West, settlers often struggled to find enough to eat. Moreover, the knowledge required to identify edible plants or hunt game was not universal. Many individuals lacked the expertise needed to secure food reliably. Imagine being in a situation where the only source of nourishment is a small garden or a hunting trip that has yielded little. The stress of food insecurity would loom large, compounding the difficulties faced by settlers. Cultural interactions and conflicts. As we explore the complexities of survival in the Wild West, we cannot ignore the cultural interactions and conflicts that characterized this era. The relationships between different groups, settlers, Native Americans, and immigrants, were fraught with tension and misunderstanding. Native American displacement. The expansion of settlers into the West often came at the expense of indigenous populations. The forced removal of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands led to violent conflicts and tragic consequences. Imagine being an indigenous person, witnessing the encroachment on your land, seeing your way of life disrupted, and facing violence from those who sought to claim what was rightfully yours. The psychological impact of such displacement would be profound. The loss of land, culture, and identity created a deep sense of grief and anger. For settlers, navigating these complex relationships could be fraught with moral dilemmas, forcing them to confront the consequences of their actions. Moreover, the lack of understanding between different groups often led to stereotypes and prejudices that fueled conflict. The settlers' perception of Native Americans as savages created a divide that perpetuated violence and mistrust. Imagine living in a world where your very existence is seen as a threat, where cultural differences are met with hostility rather than understanding. Immigrant experiences. Immigrants from various backgrounds also faced significant challenges in the Wild West. Many sought a better life, but they often encountered discrimination and hostility. For example, Chinese laborers who worked on the Transcontinental Railroad faced immense prejudice and violence. Imagine being part of a marginalized community, working tirelessly to contribute to society, only to be met with suspicion and resentment. The struggles of immigrants highlight the complexities of survival in the Wild West. The desire for acceptance and belonging was often met with barriers that made it difficult to thrive. The lack of support systems and resources for marginalized groups compounded their challenges, creating a reality where survival was a daily battle. Conclusion. In summary, the Wild West was a harsh landscape where survival demanded resilience, adaptability, and a diverse skill set. The interplay of technological limitations, the grueling realities of everyday life, and the complexities of cultural interactions created a challenging environment that few could navigate successfully. As we reflect on this period in history, we gain insight into the strength and determination of those who lived through these challenges. The stories of survival in the Wild West serve as a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure, adapt, and ultimately thrive against the odds. However, for most of us today, the challenges faced by those in the Wild West remain daunting and insurmountable. The modern conveniences we often take for granted, access to education, healthcare, and social support, are luxuries that would have made a significant difference in the lives of frontier settlers. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a daunting challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. As we continue to explore the myriad reasons that would make survival in the Wild West a daunting task for most of us today, it's important to delve into the psychological and emotional aspects of frontier life. The interplay of mental health, community dynamics, and the constant struggle for survival created an environment where many would find it exceedingly difficult to thrive. The psychological burden of survival. The psychological burden of living in the Wild West cannot be overstated. The constant pressures of survival, coupled with the harsh realities of daily life, could lead to significant mental health challenges. The stigma surrounding mental health during this time meant that many individuals suffered in silence, unable to seek help or understanding. Imagine living in a world where the threat of violence was ever present, where each day could bring new dangers. The constant state of vigilance required to navigate such an environment could lead to chronic stress and anxiety. For many settlers, the fear of losing their homes, their livelihoods, or even their lives created a pervasive sense of helplessness. In modern society, we often have access to mental health resources and support networks that allow us to cope with stress and trauma. In the Wild West, however, individuals had to rely on their own reserves of strength to confront their challenges. The inability to articulate feelings or seek help could lead to a spiral of despair, further complicating the struggle for survival. The impact of isolation. Isolation was another significant psychological challenge faced by many settlers. While some communities were formed, the vast distances between homesteads meant that many individuals lived in relative solitude. Imagine being cut off from friends and family, with no immediate support system to turn to during difficult times. The emotional toll of isolation can lead to feelings of loneliness and depression. In a world where connection and companionship were crucial for survival, the absence of social interaction could create an overwhelming sense of despair. The psychological impact of being alone for extended periods would weigh heavily on anyone, making it difficult to maintain motivation and hope. Moreover, the lack of modern communication methods further exacerbated this isolation. In today's world, we can easily reach out to loved ones through phones and social media, but in the Wild West, letters could take weeks to arrive, if they arrived at all. Imagine the anxiety of not knowing how your family or friends are faring, especially in a time when danger was a constant companion. The role of community dynamics. While communities were essential for survival, they were not without their own complexities. The dynamics within a community could vary widely, and the relationships between settlers were often shaped by competition, jealousy, and fear. Imagine moving into a new settlement, eager to build connections, only to find that existing rivalries and conflicts made integration difficult. The pressure to conform to social norms and expectations could lead to feelings of inadequacy for those who struggled to fit in. The fear of ostracization could prevent individuals from seeking help or forming meaningful relationships, exacerbating the isolation they might already feel. Furthermore, the fragile nature of trust within these communities could create tension. Disputes over land, resources, or personal grievances could escalate quickly. The absence of a reliable legal system meant that many disagreements were settled outside the bounds of reason and civility. Imagine living in a place where a simple misunderstanding could lead to violence or retaliation. The atmosphere of fear and mistrust would make it exceedingly difficult to foster a sense of safety and belonging. The stresses of gender roles. Gender roles in the Wild West added another layer of complexity to the struggle for survival. While women played vital roles in their families and communities, societal expectations often confined them to traditional roles. The pressure to conform to these norms could stifle ambitions and creativity, leaving many women feeling trapped. Imagine being a woman who dreams of running her own business or pursuing a career, only to be met with resistance from those who believe women should remain in the home. The societal expectations placed on women could create a sense of frustration and helplessness, further complicating the quest for independence and fulfillment. Moreover, women often faced unique challenges related to their safety and well-being. The constant threat of violence, whether from outlaws or even within their own communities, meant that many women had to navigate a treacherous landscape. Imagine living in a world where your safety is always in question, where the fear of assault or harassment is a daily reality. The psychological toll of such fears could be overwhelming. The burden of responsibility. For many settlers, the burden of responsibility weighed heavily on their shoulders. The need to provide for one's family, protect loved ones, and maintain a homestead created immense pressure. Imagine the anxiety of knowing that your family's survival depends on your ability to succeed in a harsh and unforgiving environment. The realities of frontier life meant that failure was not an option. A failed crop, a sick animal, or a lost harvest could spell disaster for a family. The emotional toll of such pressures could lead to a sense of hopelessness, particularly for those who struggled to meet expectations. The weight of responsibility could become a crushing burden, making it difficult to focus on self-care or seek support. The struggles of parenting. The challenges of parenting in the Wild West were particularly daunting. Parents faced the dual pressures of providing for their children while also protecting them from the dangers of the environment. Imagine raising children in a world where the threat of disease, violence, and food insecurity was ever present. The lack of access to education also meant that many children did not receive the schooling they needed to succeed. Parents often had to prioritize survival over education, leading to a cycle of poverty and limited opportunity. Imagine watching your children grow up without the skills necessary to navigate the complexities of society. The emotional toll of such limitations would weigh heavily on any parent's heart. Moreover, the harsh realities of life on the frontier often meant that families were separated. Whether due to illness, accidents, or the demands of work, the constant threat of loss loomed large. The grief of losing a loved one could be profound, and the inability to process that grief in a healthy way could lead to ongoing emotional struggles. The struggle with addiction. In the face of such overwhelming challenges, some settlers turned to alcohol or other substances as a coping mechanism. The pressures of frontier life and the constant threat of violence could create an environment where individuals sought escape through substance use. Imagine living in a world where the only means of coping with the daily stresses of survival is through alcohol, which can lead to addiction and further complications. The stigma surrounding addiction at the time meant that those struggling with substance use disorder often faced shame and isolation. The inability to seek help or understanding could lead to a downward spiral, exacerbating the challenges of survival. Today, we recognize addiction as a complex issue that requires support and treatment, But in the Wild West, many individuals suffered alone, further complicating their ability to thrive. The emotional aftermath of violence. The violence that permeated life in the Wild West left deep emotional scars on those who experienced it. The constant threat of conflict and the reality of living in a violent society could lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and other mental health challenges. Imagine witnessing a violent altercation or losing a loved one to violence. Such experiences could haunt individuals for the rest of their lives. The lack of understanding surrounding mental health issues meant that many individuals did not have the tools to process their trauma. The absence of supportive networks and resources could lead to a cycle of suffering that perpetuated the challenges of survival. Today, we recognize the importance of addressing mental health, but in the Wild West, individuals often had to endure their pain alone. Conclusion. In conclusion, the Wild West was a period marked by immense challenges that would be insurmountable for most of us today. The psychological burdens of survival, isolation, community dynamics, and the emotional aftermath of violence created a landscape where few could thrive. As we look back on this chapter of history, we gain insight into the resilience and determination of those who lived through such hardships. The stories of survival in the Wild West serve as a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure against the odds. However, for the vast majority of us, the realities faced by settlers in the Wild West remain daunting. The modern conveniences and support systems we often take for granted, access to education, healthcare, and mental health resources, are luxuries that would have made a significant difference in the lives of frontier settlers. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a formidable challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. As we continue to explore the numerous reasons that would make survival in the Wild West exceedingly difficult for most of us today, it's essential to delve into aspects of environmental challenges, societal expectations, and the moral dilemmas that settlers faced, which added layers of complexity to their daily existence. Environmental challenges. The Wild West was characterized by its diverse yet often unforgiving landscapes. While the promise of fertile land and abundant resources drew many settlers, the reality was frequently starkly different. Weather extremes. The climate in the Wild West varied dramatically, leading to severe weather conditions that could impact survival. Settlers often faced scorching summers with temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit and frigid winters that could plunge well below freezing. Imagine enduring a summer heat wave without modern conveniences like air conditioning or the ability to hydrate easily. Dehydration would be a real threat, exacerbated by the physical labor required to maintain a homestead. Conversely, winters could be brutal. Snowstorms could immobilize entire communities, making it nearly impossible to access food or supplies. The pressure to prepare for winter months was immense, as many families relied on their ability to store food and fuel. The fear of running out of essentials during a long winter could lead to severe anxiety. Today, we have the benefit of weather forecasting and emergency services, but in the Wild West, unpredictable weather could spell disaster. Natural disasters. In addition to temperature extremes, settlers had to contend with natural disasters such as floods, droughts, and wildfires. Picture investing time and resources into cultivating a field of crops, only to have a sudden rainstorm wash everything away. Many settlers faced the grim reality of their homes and livelihoods being destroyed by floods, which could happen quickly and without warning. Drought was another significant concern. Many areas of the Wild West were prone to extended dry spells, which could devastate crops and lead to food shortages. The psychological toll of watching your hard work wither under the relentless sun would be profound. Today, we have irrigation techniques and agricultural technology to mitigate such challenges. But in the Wild West, the survival of crops often depended solely on the whims of nature. Societal expectations. The societal norms of the Wild West presented formidable challenges to survival. The expectations placed on settlers, particularly regarding gender roles and family dynamics, could create additional stressors. Gender roles. Women played vital roles in their families and communities, yet they often faced restrictions that limited their opportunities. While some women managed to carve out successful lives as homesteaders or business owners, many were bound by the cultural expectations of the time. Imagine being a woman with aspirations of contributing to your community, only to be met with resistance from those who believe women should remain in the domestic sphere. The pressure to conform to these traditional roles could stifle ambition. Many women were expected to fulfill domestic duties, such as cooking, cleaning, and raising children, while their contributions to the community were often undervalued. The emotional toll of navigating such expectations could lead to feelings of frustration and helplessness. Today, we recognize the importance of gender equality and empowerment, but in the Wild West, many women were constrained by societal norms that kept them from realizing their potential. Family dynamics. Family dynamics in the Wild West were often complicated. The pressures of survival meant that families had to work together, but the stress of everyday life could lead to conflict and tension. Imagine facing the loss of a loved one due to illness or violence. The grief and burden of such a loss could fracture familial bonds, making it difficult to come together in times of need. The emotional toll of navigating relationships in such a volatile environment could lead to feelings of isolation and despair. The harsh realities of life on the frontier often meant that families were separated. Whether due to illness, accidents, or the demands of work, the constant threat of loss loomed large. The grief of losing a family member could be profound, and the inability to process that grief in a healthy way could lead to ongoing emotional struggles. Moral dilemmas. The Wild West was not just a physical battleground, it was also a moral one. The pressures of survival often forced settlers into difficult ethical choices that could have long-lasting consequences. Conflict and violence. The absence of a reliable legal system meant that disputes were often settled with violence rather than dialogue. Imagine living in a community where a simple disagreement could escalate into a deadly confrontation. The fear of becoming a victim of theft, assault, or even murder loomed large. The constant threat of violence created an atmosphere where survival often depended on one's ability to navigate interpersonal conflicts. Consider the psychological toll of living with such fear. The stress of potential violence could lead to heightened anxiety and paranoia, making it difficult to find peace or security. Additionally, the moral dilemmas surrounding the use of violence could weigh heavily on one's conscience. The struggle to balance self-preservation with ethical considerations could create a profound internal conflict. Stake in community justice. Settlers had to grapple with the concept of justice in a world where law enforcement was often inadequate. The desire for retribution could lead individuals to take the law into their own hands. Imagine witnessing an injustice and feeling compelled to act, only to find that your actions have unintended consequences. The cycle of revenge and violence could perpetuate itself, making it difficult to break free from conflict. The emotional aftermath of such choices would weigh heavily on individuals. The inability to resolve conflict peacefully would create a cycle of trauma that could echo through families and communities for generations. Today, we recognize the importance of restorative justice and conflict resolution. But in the Wild West, individuals often had to navigate a landscape where the line between right and wrong was blurred. Conclude summary. The Wild West was a harsh and unforgiving landscape where survival required more than just physical strength or determination. The interplay of environmental challenges, societal expectations, and moral dilemmas created a reality that tested the limits of human endurance. The psychological burdens of isolation, the pressures of gender roles, and the constant threat of violence compounded the difficulties faced by settlers. As we reflect on this period in history, we gain insight into the resilience and determination of those who lived through these challenges. The stories of survival in the Wild West serve as a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure, adapt, and ultimately thrive against the odds. However, for most of us today, the challenges faced by those in the Wild West remain daunting and insurmountable. The modern conveniences and support systems we take for granted, access to education, healthcare, and mental health resources, are luxuries that would have made a significant difference in the lives of frontier settlers. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of why survival in the Wild West would be a formidable challenge for most of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and appreciate the many comforts and supports that modern life provides. The unpredictability of daily life was relentless.